Hey everyone, Clayton here with Geek Gamer Alert. Today we're going to look at the Nintendo controllers, what I think are good, what I think are bad. Keep in mind, I don't have a Wii U, so it's only up to the Wii. As soon as I get a Wii U, I'll do a video on it that way. But let's get started. So we'll start off with the NES Controller, specifically the regular controller and the zapper. So of the two, we'll start first with the NES Controller. The NES Controller is a classic. It's a square little controller. There's not much to it. AB, D-pad, start select. That's all there is to it. You wouldn't think there's much to say, but honestly, think of it. This is where controllers basically started. I know a lot of people are like, but Clayton, joysticks on the Atari. No, a joystick is a whole different thing. I'm a computer gamer as well. Joysticks kind of swerved off onto the computer land. The way it is that this, right here, this is the first controller for me. This is the original. And yes, you know what? Hours of gameplay with this, uncomfortable. You get nice little corners wedged into your palms, and it's not fun. But you kept playing, because damn, those games were hard. But as it stands, it's a good all-around controller. It was simple because the games were simple. They didn't need anything more than these buttons here. There's not much else to say about it. It's a classic. That's it. Next, we come to the zapper. An iconic orange gun, and used mostly, well, by me at least, for duck hunt. A lot of them, there was also gray ones. I'm not sure if those were for the actual Famicom or if those were just another variation of this one. But this one's so bright and colorful, how can you not love it? It's fun. Makes a really annoying noise. Who cares? And the fact that it used a little sensor that saw the light where the ducks were on the screen, or whatever you were shooting was on the screen at the time, was pretty good for the technology at the time. But at the time. Still, classic controller. I know a lot are going to be saying, well, Clayton, this isn't a regular controller or anything. It was. For me, and a lot of people like me who love Duck Hunt, who loved games like Wild Gunman, stuff like that, this was the controller. This was the controller right here. So it was a regular controller for a lot of us. On to our next thing. Next up, we'll be covering the Super Nintendo controller. Exactly everything that we wanted out of the NES controller. It's an upgrade, basically. Nice and round. More buttons because the games could handle more buttons and needed them. D-pad. Start and select. You even got some shoulder buttons. Here's the advent of shoulder buttons right here, folks. Right here. This is a well-loved controller. This is loved by even more people than the NES controller. And I'm not even kidding on that. This is a well-loved controller, and the games on the SNES, are some of the best. That's me. That's a lot of other people out there, and we'll tell you all the same. Got the nice little gray with purple. Who but Nintendo would probably think of a mixture of gray and purple as its color scheme, but it worked. All around, this is one of my favorite controllers. It's simple, but it's rounded, it's easy on the hands. There's not much else to say. This is just good right here. Now, let's move on to the next one. Next up, the Nintendo 64 controller and its attachments. Here we go, folks, into the 64-bit generation. The N64, that is. This was a wild change for them. From a rounded controller to what looks like a trident, basically. Shall I rule the 7 seas with this? No. But actually, this was a fairly well-made controller to a point. I have some gripes. One, a lot of times you would find yourself holding it by these two parts, because this is where the majority of the buttons is, where the trigger is. And a stick. Oh, it's so lovely. Anyways, yeah. Got buttons we have now. It looks like a second D-pad or a kind of D-pad, or the yellow C-pad, I guess is what it's called. Red start button, but my biggest problem was this. The D-pad is over here on the far fork, or far prong, whatever you want to call it. And you had to move your hand over to here to do it. And in action games you don't want to be doing that because you got to keep your hand in place, move like this. This is the movement one right here. Has the shoulder buttons. This was usually for camera movement or selecting things. It's a good controller. It is a good controller, and it's got lots of promise. It was a show. It was a sign that they were experimenting, is that they wanted to see how to make things better. They weren't just stagnating, nothing like that. It was a very adaptable controller, and interestingly enough, adaptable is the word. See this right here? It is a slot. And there were a bunch of different peripherals you could attach into it. The first was a memory card. Now this one, I have two different types. This one I believe is an off-brand, but it's still registered for the car, for the 64. It goes in, there you go. This was the actual Nintendo brand memory card. Much smaller. It looks like you hardly put anything. It just looks like a plug, right, basically. The bigger thing, the one that ate your batteries all the time because you wanted it, the rumble pack. The thing that made your controller fall out of your hands if you weren't holding onto it at all times. But it was the advent of rumble right there. And last of all was a very slightly used peripheral, mostly used for games like Pokemon Stadium and such, is the Game Boy adapter. You stuck this in here, and in the case of like Pokemon Stadium, you had all the Pokemons that you caught would go through here and into the game, and you get to use them in 3D, which was awesome at the time. You got 3D Pokemon like, what? They're really looking. And like, what is it? It's awesome. It was awesome at the time. Pokemon is still awesome to this day, and yes, I do play it. Overall, it's a very versatile and interesting controller. Odd design, but I'll take it. I will take it. It's good. It's fun. Had a great time. Next up. Next will be the GameCube controllers, both the regular type and the Wavebird. The GameCube controller. This is the regular one, wired one. This is the one, I think this is even the color. This is the basic color, it's the black one. In fact, I'm going to hold it up because my shirt is black. This was another interesting innovation for them, because it still changed things that we had before on the N64 controller. And you see where the C-pad turned into its own little stick right here. A nice little stick. And then they have the regular stick. We know how I feel about those. Anyways, they had an X and Y button. Like, all of them have had X and Y, but now they've become like these little around the corner buttons basically. Green, big green A, smaller red B, and the start button in the center. Itty bitty start button. Now these ones did come, some of them, with rumble. Not many. I don't think this one has it. The top of it though, unlike a lot of other ones, the shoulder buttons here, you can see, are triggers, and they're pressure sensitive too. In certain games like, I don't know, Fire Emblem. And that one there, if you held down the right trigger, right bumper, it would make parts of the screen invisible so you could see the whole screen. It would make the parts of the HUD invisible. But if you held it down slowly, you could actually make it somewhat semi-transparent. It's an interesting little effect. It's kind of a neat thing, but it's like, it's not big. I don't care. Up here also is your Z button. This was the Z button. And this was the trigger on the 64. But now it's just another little shoulder button. Almost like they put it there as an afterthought, because there's not another one over here. Whatever. It works out. This is actually a very comfortable controller all around. This is one of the best and easiest to hold. Even better than my favorite, the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo just has a place in my heart for nostalgia purposes. For practicality, this one's where it's at. This is the comfortable one. You can get in there and just like, that is the perfect setup, for especially at least for somebody with my big hands. Overall, that's about it for that one. But there is a second part to this. And that part is called the Wavebird. The Wavebird is basically like one of the first wireless controllers, the first proper wireless controller. This thing sucks down double-A batteries pretty bad, and you got to make sure you remember to keep it off. But otherwise, it's the exact same setup and control-wise as the regular controller. It's just a bit bigger because it has to hold the batteries. And to go with it, instead of plugging in a cord, this is its little receiver that you plug into the spot instead. And you got to make sure there's a little thing here. You have to switch it back around like this, and it has a channel. And you have to make sure it is on the same channel as the controller, which is here. And if it isn't, well, your controller is not going to work. Overall, this is my favorite controller here, just as... yeah, actually this is even better than the GameCube Controller normal because it's wireless. Who wants those wires hanging around, right? Am I right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Nobody wants wires. Wireless is where it's at. That's why everything is wireless these days. Moving on. Lastly, we'll be covering the Nintendo Wii's Wiimote, plus its nunchuck, and the Wii Motion Plus attachment for the bottom, and the classic controller. This is what it boiled down to. The Wiimote. A controller that somehow from all the iterations of a little box to a rounder controller to a weird trident to a rather more basic looking controller to this. It's a remote. Or a Wiimote. Because they gotta call it Wiimote. I may sound like I'm being harsh on it. I do like the Wiimote. Especially mine, it's blue. But I don't know about it. It is an odd thing. They were doing it to make it so it was like, we have motion controls. We're the first to have it. Love us. Love us. We have motion controls. But it's not badly set up, I suppose. It has its D-pad, it has A, it has a weird plus and minus, which I find usually is just used for scrolling through things. It has the home button to get you back to the main menu. It has 1 and 2, and you're thinking, wait, 1 and 2, it has an A, where's the B? B is right here. It's trigger. Yeah, it's not a gun, it's just, well, it makes it more interesting, I guess. You also have the power button here. First of its kind, have a power button to turn the system off. I like that. Because who wants to get up to go turn the power off on their machine? Just use the remote. Oh wait, it's a remote with a power button. I just got that. Anyways, going on from this has had a few peripherals, so I'm going to show you a couple. The first and most important in my thoughts, the Wii Motion Plus. This little box, somehow, when it connects to the bottom, lock it in, this makes the cursor more steady on games and on the main menu. I don't know how it does it, but it works. I like it. I don't play without this thing on my controller. And thankfully, on the bottom, it still has a hookup for the peripherals, the nunchuck and such. Speaking of the nunchuck, here it is. This was basically the other half of the controller. When they cut the controller in half to make a Wiimote, they're like, where are we going to put the stick? It's over here. It's over here, along with the Z button, and the C button. So the C went from a weird little D-pad to a stick to a button. It kind of got downgraded. That's kind of sad for C. But does anybody really care? Probably not. Hooks right in. And there you go. You have your motion controls. Somehow this one actually tracks motion sometimes too. I'm not sure how, but it does. At least I think it just tracks you shaking it. I think there's a thing in it for that. This one is the main motion control. This is the stick for going around, wandering around everything. It's not bad, and you don't have to be that crazy guy going like... You can sit there literally and just go, I just have these by your side and go... Yeah. It's not, you don't have to be as zany as those guys in the commercials. Second and last here is what I use the most. The classic controller. Great for all those old games you can buy off the Wii store. Now this reminds me very much of a Super Nintendo controller. It has the same setup for this here. It has a start and select, but wait. It has sticks. I love it. It's already better than everything. Anyways, it also has its bumpers. It has 2 Z buttons, just to split them into smaller ones. And for whatever reason, this thing here. I think it's to do with connecting it onto pieces, because you can. That's what this is. Never had a use for that. Has its home button otherwise, and it's actually quite comfortable. It's not like the weird bulging ends like the Super Nintendo. It is just an elongated oval, basically. And it's not bad. It's comfortable, it's light, it's fun. And I'm okay with that. So overall, I have to say that this is not a bad controller. And I think Nintendo's done a few good things. So overall, I have to say, they've made some interesting changes here and there, but Nintendo has kind of kept itself ahead of the curve, or maybe it's defined the curve, for all I know, for innovation when it comes to controllers especially. They've made big changes, big differences, and somehow they've always come out ahead. People still love Nintendo to this day. Sure, Xboxes, PlayStations, Microsoft and Sony in that case, they've done quite well for themselves, but they stick with the formula that works for them. Whereas Nintendo is like, no. We're going to move ahead. Like, okay, we had a square controller, we got to round that stuff off. People are saying their hands hurt. Move it to there, okay, we need more buttons because these games are more fancy. So it's like moves from there. Okay, we're moving into the new dimension, new 3D games. 3D games. Let's get a stick on there. Get the stick, get the trigger, get things like that. You got to add more buttons, and therefore you got to find a way to place them. The trident shape of the 64 controller, a little odd, but I can still love it. You move on to the GameCube, which is possibly the most normal looking compared to, like, if you compare to not N64, 360 and PlayStation, the Xbox ones like that, it looks closest to those. And it's not bad. That's comfortable, easy on the hands. That's a good thing. But they went one step further, and they're like, motion controls, we're doing it. Motion controls right now. It's like, well, what about our controllers? They don't work with it. A remote. Right there, like that. Done. Remote. There you go. I'm done. I got it for you guys. It's a remote. Okay, sure, why not? And they went with it. And it's a remote. And you know what? It worked. It's a little hard on the wrist after a while, so you can't really play for long periods of time. But it's still fun. So overall, I'd say Nintendo has made some damn good controllers. And I really don't really have anything else to say about it. That is about it. Honestly, I just love Nintendo. Oh yeah, not biased at all. Well, on that note, I think that's about all for today, folks. Catch you next time. I think next time I'm going to be doing the Xbox controllers. Up to 360. Once again, don't have an Xbox One. Might have an Xbox One by that time, but we'll see. Catch you later. Yeah.